Welcome to LIVEDAF, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Eruvin Daf Yud Aleph, on Daf Yud on base, 4 lines from the bottom. Says the Gemara, Im yesh lo tzuras haPesach. So we're getting back to our Mishnah, which told us, generally speaking, the entryway to a mavi must be 10 amas wide or less, because if it's beyond 10 amas, it loses its Pesach status. It's regarded like a pirza, and as a result, one cannot carry in this mavi, which has been breached to Rishus HaRabim. But the Mishnah told us that there is a tzuras haPesach there, which is a physical configuration of a doorway, a post on either side with a post on top, that enables even a large entranceway, even if it's wider than 10 amas, because this is considered a doorway. It's an entity on its own, and is regarded like a mechitza. It creates that partition and encloses the area within it. Says the more 4 lines from the bottom, Im yesh lo tzuras haPesach. If the entryway to the mavi features a tzuras haPesach that acts like a mechitza, and therefore afal pi sherachav me'eser, even if the doorway is wider than 10 amos, ein tzarich lemait. He does not need to narrow the doorway. Says the Gemara, Ashichan tzuras haPesach, the mahani berachvei. So we find that tzuras haPesach is effective when it comes to a wide doorway. Va'amaltra, the mahani begavei. Likewise, we find that amaltra, which are these designs, artistic creations, which are attached to the koira, they are effective. So even if the koira is up high, it's beyond 20 amos, and generally that's beyond the ordinary person's field of vision. But if they have designs, if the koira has these things which attract attention, it makes it visible. And one can use the koira in this manner, even if it's beyond 20 amos. So amaltra, which we discussed in Av Gimel, the mahanya begava, it is effective. It works with regards to the height of the mavi. They are machshir, they enable the koira, which is way up beyond 20, to be used. Let's take a look at Rashi in the bottom line. The mahanya baracha, so this is tzuras haPesach, which is effective when it comes to the width of the mavi, lahachshir rachav me'eser, to enable a doorway which is wider than 10 amos. V'amaltra, the mahanya begoiva lahachshir, to allow the koira, which is gavoya me'esrim, beyond 20 amos. So this is a given. Tzuras haPesach works for width, amaltra for height. What about the reverse? Says the Gemara, Daf Yud Aleph, Amar Aleph. If chamay, what about the reverse? For instance, if you have the koira, which is beyond 20 amos, but you have a tzuras haPesach configured there, is it effective? Or when you speak about a wide doorway beyond 10 amos, but there's amaltra, we have designs on those side posts which make it attractive, call attention to them, does that enable the use of this wide entry point? Perhaps it serves to bring those walls together, to bring them closer, to make them more visible, like they're working with each other. So despite the fact that they're too wide apart, but if there are some of these designs there that attract attention, perhaps that can work as well. That's the Gemara's shaila. Does amaltra work for width, and tzuras haPesach for height? Tashma, the Sani, as we learned, mavi shu gavoy mesrim amma. So if the mavi is beyond 20 amos, the koira is beyond the esrim, he must bring it down. And if it has the tzuras haPesach, then it's okay. So apparently, tzuras haPesach is effective when something is beyond the standard height. Because the point of tzuras haPesach is that it closes up the area. It's considered like a mechitza, like a wall. So that works, regardless of the fact that the koira is beyond 20 amos. So we have a conclusion on that. What about amaltra berachvei mai? Regarding the second question, does amaltra work regarding a wide entry point? So if we have a Pesach which is wider than 10 amos, and we have the designs on those posts, is it effective? Does it serve as though to bring closer those sides of the entry point? Tashma, the sign is we learned in the Brisa, mavi shu gavoy mesrim amma. So the mavi which is higher than 20, you must bring down the koira. V'rachav me'eser, if it is wider than 10 amos, he must lessen the width of the entry point. He does not need to be mamait the size of the entry point, Because as we just said, the Suras HaPesach serves and is effective regardless of the size of the entry point. If it's wider than 10, it's okay. If it's beyond 20, it's okay. So it serves even in a wide Pesach or a very tall Pesach. And the Brisa concludes, likewise, if there is an amaltra present at the entry point of the Mavi, it does not need to lessen the size of that Mavi, of the entry point of the Mavi. My lava safe. Should we not assume that this halacha is in reference to the second part of the Brisa, which is discussing the very wide entranceway? So apparently the amaltra is effective there as well. It's referring to the first halacha in the Brisa, which was describing the kair which was beyond 20. And there indeed the amaltra is effective, because it serves to attract attention to the kair which is way up in the air, and therefore it's effective. But when it comes to an entry point which is beyond, which is wider than 10 ames, those walls on either side are too far apart to serve with each other. This area is a pirza. So despite the fact that it's attractive, attracts attention due to the designs which are present on those side walls, it doesn't do much. It doesn't bring them any closer. This area is a gap, it's a pirza. Designs are not effective. It only works when you have the kaira up in the air. The problem there is that it's perhaps not visible. It's beyond your vision. But if there's something to attract special attention, then that enables it. And that is effective. So we have no conclusion regarding the amaltra being applied to a very wide opening. But in summary, when it comes to Tzuras HaPesach, certainly that is effective whether it's for height or for width. Because Tzuras HaPesach serves like a mechitza. Continues the Gemara. So this was the version that we have based on our Mishnah. Masni le Rav Yehuda. So Rav Yehuda taught, he was the Rebbe here, the Chia Barav. He taught Chia, the son of Rav, Kamei de Rav, in the presence of Rav, Einoi tzorech lamayit. He told him this halacha, that if the entry to the Mavi is wider than 10 ames, and there is a Tzuras HaPesach there, that serves like a mechitza. It's as though it's built up. There's no need to narrow the area. So when Rav heard this, he disagreed. He said, why don't you teach him the correct version? Esnai, you should teach him tzorech lamayit. Now he does need to lessen the width of that entryway, because Rav holds that whenever there's a pirza, a Tzuras HaPesach is not effective to close off a breach. So this entry point, which is wider than 10 ames, is a pirza. A Tzuras HaPesach cannot be applied in this case. He disagrees with this halach. From the words of Rabbeinu, meaning Rav, we can learn as follows. Just as he does not allow applying a Tzuras HaPesach to the pirza which is present when we have a very wide entryway, so we want to apply that concept elsewhere. That we cannot apply a Tzuras HaPesach to another type of pirza as well. What is the case? Chotzer sheruba psachim v'chalenis. We have a courtyard which is surrounded by walls, which features mostly psachim, entryways and windows, meaning that it's mostly breached. So the sum total of the enclosure here features mostly gaps. It's parutz meruba loimet. So Rav Yosef says, apparently, according to Rebbe, a Tzuras HaPesach will not be effective to close up this area. Einu niteretz b'Tzuras HaPesach. He cannot go ahead and affix Tzuras HaPesachs throughout these walls, these breached walls, because since this enclosure is not properly enclosed, it's mostly exposed, it's parutz meruba, it's a pirza. Rebbe holds that a Tzuras HaPesach is not affected by a pirza. As he explains, my time and why. Since we find that an entryway to a mavi which is wider than 10 ames and is a pirza, so that's one example. So just as we find, since we find that the entry point which is more than eser, which is oiser b'mavi, and we find that an area which is mostly exposed, paratz meruba lo'omed, is oiser b'chatzer. It makes the chatzer aser b'total, since the sum total of the enclosure is more gaps, more openings, more breaching than built, parts merubal oimed, is oiser by chatzer. So we're going to compare these two versions of pirza to each other. Ma yoiser me'eser oiser b'mavi, just as we find regarding the pirza, due to the fact that the entrance to the mavi is wider than 10 ames, and it is oiser the mavi, eino nita b'tzuras haPesach, one cannot enable it, cannot permit it through using a tzuras haPesach, which is ineffective by a pirza, according to Rav. The same thing regarding this chatzer, which is mostly exposed. Av parts merubal oimed oiser b'chatzer. Likewise, the concept of parts, which is merubal oimed. So when we have the sum total of the walls, which are mostly breached, it's called parts merubal oimed. This is oiser b'chatzer, is considered to be mostly exposed and not enclosed. So since it has a pirza, eino nita b'tzuras haPesach, can now come mutter through applying a tzuras haPesach to enclose this area, through applying these physical configurations of doorways to close up those gaps. Because according to Rav, a tzuras haPesach is ineffective by a pirza. According to Rav, we don't consider tzuras haPesach like a machitza, so it does not rectify a pirza. Let's see Rashi inside the top line in the Amid. So Rav responded, Esnai tzarech lamai, teach him the correct version, that one needs to be memayit the width of the doorway, afil yesher tzuras haPesach, and the Gemara continues, that Rav Yosef says, Medivrei Rabbeinu, from the words of Rav, the Amar tzuras haPesach le'mahanya, that it's not affected by this pirza. If so, the courtyard, which is surrounded mostly by gaps, sheruba psachem ba'arba dafneseh, on the four walls, einin niteres b'tzuras haPesach. And the chiddush here is, even if those holes are narrower, are 10 ames, they're not larger than 10 ames, afilu psacheh ktanim me'eser, it won't work. Why? Because the sum total is mostly exposure. It's parts meruba. Just as tzuras haPesach is not effective, it's not effective. It doesn't help to turn into an area which is a gap which is more than 10 ames, which is a pirza. It doesn't help to turn it into a Pesach. Likewise, it won't work by our case as well. It can't prove effective to a case where there's mostly gaps, even if those gaps are small size psachim, because the sum total of this enclosure is mostly exposure. It's parts meruba, has then a breached area. So tzuras haPesach can't substitute for mechitza, can't create enclosure. That's Rav Yosef's chiddush. Just as according to Rav, tzuras haPesach can't be applied to a wide entryway, wider than 10 ames, because it's a pirza. The same thing will happen when an area is enclosed, encircled by walls which are mostly gaps, which creates a pirza, and tzuras haPesach cannot be applied. Continues the Gemara. Perhaps there's room to differentiate between one deficiency, a Pesach which is wider than 10 ames, which in itself is too big to be a Pesach. So perhaps we can differentiate between there, which tzuras haPesach will not be effective, in contrast to a case where a place is enclosed by walls, which are proper walls. There's no one gap there which is wider than 10 ames. So despite the fact that the sum total of the enclosure equals mostly exposure, parts meruba, perhaps it's different, because each individual opening, each individual entranceway is not wider than 10 ames. So perhaps it's not as terrible as a wide open entranceway. Let's see inside. It says the Gemara, Mali Yosef me'eser, ha'oser b'mavi. Perhaps the pirza which is greater than 10 ames, which is oser by the mavi, perhaps that's inferior. It's worse. Sheken lo yitar taboy, itzel paseh b'rois rameya. As we see that we don't allow by paseh b'rois. These are the posts which are constructed around the well, as we learned yesterday, to allow drawing from the well, which is Rishis HaYachid, to allow drawing from the water into Rishis HaRabim, to accommodate the animals of the Oile Regel. So Chacham allowed them to construct pasei b'rois, these posts, these twin posts on all four sides of the be'er. So the be'er is in the middle, and on all four sides you have these posts. So they're very incomplete mechitzes. They're merely encircling by being placed on all four corners, but there's large gaps in between them, and the sum total of the area within them is definitely not mostly enclosed, it's mostly exposed. and it's still mutter. But when it comes to the space between those posts, according to our mayor, that space is considered Pesach, and it cannot be wider than 10 amis. It's meant to allow the cows to go in and out, and the maximum width is 10 amis. Says the Gemara, we find that by possibilities, despite the fact that we're very lenient, we allow the use of this improperly enclosed area, a place which is mostly exposed. It's parts meruba, but when it comes to the size of the each individual gap, we don't allow it to be greater than 10 amis. So you see that a gap which is greater than 10 amis, this type of pirza, is very serious, very grave. How can you compare the breach of Yosem Me'eser, which is Oyser by Mavi, which seems to be a very serious type of pirza? We don't allow it to be applied to Pasibiros Rav Meir. So the maximum we can allow by the Pasibiros is an entranceway which is 10 or less. But a pirza, an entranceway which is larger than 10, is aser there. How could you compare this to the concept of Paratz Meruba? So walls which are a sum total, more gap, more unbuilt than built. Which is Oyser by the Chatzar. But that seems to be less severe. Why? All agree that by those Pasibirois, one can make use, can carry in this enclosed area despite the fact that it's mostly exposed. So apparently, the pirza, the individual pirza which is more than Esser, is more severe, is more grave, carries more weight than the concept of Parutz Meruba La'omed, the sum total built portion of the walls which are less than the sum total of the gaps. Those are considered to be proper walls. So there are many gaps there, but since there isn't any one space there which is larger than 10, it's not as terrible as having one space, one entranceway which is larger than 10, which is a true bona fide pirza. So perhaps you can't compare the two things, the Gemara asks Rabbi Yosef. Perhaps, even though the Tzuras HaPesach won't be affected by a large entranceway, according to Rav, because it's a large pirza. However, when it comes to the concept of a Paratz Meruba, if you have a chatzah which is enclosed, encircled by walls, but there are many gaps and holes and doorways and windows, in which case it's mostly breached. Perhaps that's not so terrible. A Tzuras HaPesach can attach itself to the walls, to complete the walls, and as a result, we will consider this area to be fully enclosed. So we leave it inconclusive. Says the Gemara, perhaps we can bring a right to Rav Yosef that just as the Tzuras HaPesach cannot be applied to a wide entranceway, it cannot be applied to an area which isn't properly enclosed, an area which is Paratz Meruba La'omed. The Brisa says, "Tfanos halol," these walls which are surrounding, for instance, a chatzar, sheruba and psacham achalonis, that are mostly comprised of entryways and windows, all full of gaps. Mutter, so it's mutter to carry within. Bilvad, provided she'oimed murel parts, that they should be mostly standing, then unbuilt. Says, well, how are these two statements compatible with each other? You begin by speaking about an area which is mostly exposed, and you say it needs to be mostly built. Sheruba sakadayda, can you say that it's mostly exposed? Ella ema sheriba behen psacham chalen. It doesn't mean ruba, that most of the walls feature openings and gaps. It means sheriba behen psacham chalen. He applied, he made many, numerous openings and windows. Parts, provided that it's mostly standing, mostly built, than unbuilt. So we see from here that the Gemara is assuming that these psachim, which are featured in these walls, which have many breaches, these psachim have Tzuras HaPesachs. They have these physical configurations of a doorway. Nevertheless, the Brisa explicitly tells us that it can't be mostly gapped. It can be mostly parts. So we see that a Tzuras HaPesach is ineffective when the enclosure is mostly exposed due to the fact that it's a pirza. This seems to be a right of Yosef. Says, well, no, we're not speaking about Tzuras HaPesach here. Amrav Kahana Kitanya hi. But Pesach Shammai, that Bryce is relating to Psachim, which are Shimai, these destroyed entrance ways, meaning there are no Tzuras HaPesach present there. But certainly if there's a Tzuras HaPesach, it can go ahead and enclose even a person. My Pesach Shimai, what exactly is this? We have two approaches. Pligiba, Rav Chumi, Rav Yosef. Machlekes between Rav Chumi and Rav Yosef. Chadamar, one said, the Leis Lahu Shikfi. They don't have proper side posts, and that's why they're not considered like a Tzuras HaPesach. V'chadamar Leis Lahu Tikra. They don't feature a post on top, and therefore they're not considered Tzuras HaPesach, and that's why they're ineffective. Let's take a look at Rashi, which is right in the middle of the Amid, beginning with the words Pischei Shammai. Have it? Pischei Shammai. Says Rashi, Psachin Sheimim, desolate doorways. Lishna Achrin Psachim Ukulkom, destroyed, broken ones. Shemachasarim Tikkun, they're lacking proper design. Kigmai Zaken Ashmoi, which means Chasam Torah, he's lacking Torah. Shikvi, so one approach is that they don't have shikvi. Mezuzos, meaning the side posts, shenechels of name, the stones on either side were dislodged, one's protruding, one's going in. Vein Tzuras HaPesach is not a proper Tzuras HaPesach, it's not really a convenient or safe entry point. So this doesn't have a halach of Tzuras HaPesach. That's one approach. The other one said there has no tikra, meaning nothing on top of the doorway. She'ein klum binyan l'malam and HaPesach, there's nothing built on top. Like the picture in Rashi, that the wall is very smooth going up to the top. There's nothing blocking, there's no post on top. And that doesn't conform to Tzuras HaPesach. Why? Tzuras HaPesach she'amru. What is the halachic Tzuras HaPesach that was said? It needs to conform to a certain design. Kana mekan, v'kana mekan. You need a pole on each side, v'kana al gabeim, and a kana stick on top, resting on top of them. So that's why in this case, these things are not effective because it's not a Tzuras HaPesach. And therefore, the Bryce insists that the enclosure, the walls surrounding the area need to be mostly built. It needs to be oimed, meruba, to be considered a proper enclosure. But certainly if there was a Tzuras HaPesach there, perhaps, that can work in place of the gap. Continues the Gemara. V'af Rabbi Yochanan savar l'had Rav. We seem to have a right that even Rabbi Yochanan as well will hold, like Rav Shita, that if there is a Pesach greater than 10 Amos, which is a Pirza, a Tzuras HaPesach will not be effective. The Amar Ravin, Barav Ada Amar Vitzchak. There was an incident with this certain person, Mi Bikas Beis Char Vasan, from this place. Shenotz Dalut Kundesen, he stuck 4 poles, Ba'ara Pinas Asada, on the 4 corners of his field, and he stretched a branch, a vine branch, on top of these poles. So he stretched he stretched a branch aleim on top, meaning from one pole to the other. So he created a Tzuras HaPesach. And this incident came before the Chachamim to rule on this type of Tzuras HaPesach. Is it effective? And they allowed him to employ this Tzuras HaPesach with regards to Kalaim, meaning that he can plant vines inside the confines of this Tzuras HaPesach and plant another species right outside it. So although one may not mix 2 minim together, but Rashi is going to bring a Mishnah that if there's a fence in between the 2 minim, that's okay, despite the fact that they're very close to each other. The point of Kalaim is that the 2 types of plants shouldn't appear confused and mixed with each other. So as long as they appear separate, that addresses the Kalaim concern. So this fellow who had the poles with the vine running on top of them, which is considered Tzuras HaPesach, that is regarded like a mechitza, like a fence, allowing planting vines within and other plants right outside. V'amar Reish Lakish, and Reish Lakish added, just as they allowed him to employ the Tzuras HaPesach when it came to Kalaim, it's considered to be a proper separation. Likewise, they allowed him to apply this Tzuras HaPesach to Shabbos, to allow carrying within the confines of this Tzuras HaPesach. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, they only allowed him to employ for Kalaim. where this type of Tzuras HaPesach is sufficient. However, when it comes to Shabbos, the carrying within the confines of this Tzuras HaPesach, they did not permit him. Let's analyze. But my asking, what type of Tzuras HaPesach are we speaking about? Are we speaking that the top post, or in this case the vine, which was stretching from pole to pole, instead of being placed properly on top of those poles, which Rashi describes for us a minute ago, that the Tzuras HaPesach is meant to have a kana on each side and a kana on top, resting on top. That's a properly configured Tzuras HaPesach. So instead of doing that, he applied the top post on the side of these side posts. So instead of placing the post on top, to have it rest on top of the side post, in which case the whole configuration here joins and bonds and acts in unison is considered to be one entity. They're all supporting each other, the side and the top are all considered to be one entity. So instead of doing that, which is the proper halach mishmesina of Tzuras HaPesach, he applied the top post to the side of the side post. He stretched it like that. He had a side post, and he attached it to the side, and ran it from one post to the other. So this is not a proper Tzuras HaPesach. Is that what he did? That's worthless. If one built his Tzuras HaPesach in this manner, it's useless. Apparently he did it properly. He fixed the vine on top, rested on top of the pole, which is a proper Tzuras HaPesach. So let's analyze. We have a machlekes. Rabbi Shlakish says it's good for Kalayim and Shabbos, and Rabbi Yochanan says only good for Kalayim, not for Shabbos. Why is it not good for Shabbos? It's a proper Tzuras HaPesach. So let's take a look. How wide was the Tzuras HaPesach? Was it merely 10 amos wide? And what's the problem? If it was merely 10 amos wide, why would Rabbi Yochanan say in this case it can't be used for Shabbos? It's a proper Tzuras HaPesach. You have two poles, you have one on top, properly supporting each other. It's one entity of Tzuras HaPesach. It's like a mechitza. It's 10 amos or less. What's the problem? Apparently we're speaking about a wide area. The Tzuras HaPesach was wider than 10 amos. And that's the reason why Rabbi Yochanan says you can't apply it to Shabbos, because he holds like Rav. Yes, a master, that's a pirza. A Tzuras HaPesach cannot adapt a pirza. It can rectify a breach. So apparently Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rav. Says Malay, no. La'olam be'eser. Certainly we're speaking about Eser Amos, no more. Uminatzad, however, it was placed minatzad, which is not a proper Tzuras HaPesach. With the Rav Chizda Kamivlagi. The machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish is this very halacha of Rav Chizda, whether or not a Tzuras HaPesach can be built minatzad. Let's take a look at Rashi inside, 4 lines from the bottom. With the Rav Chizda Pligi. Rish Lakish less than Rav Chizda. He doesn't hold like Rav Chizda. He holds that even minatzad is considered to be a proper Tzuras HaPesach, as effective even for Shabbos, considered a mechitza. Rabbi Yochanan is like Rav Chizda. He holds like Rav Chizda. However, because Savar he holds ki ha'amar Rav Chizda l'Shabbos. Rav Chizda is strictly referring to Shabbos, which requires a proper bechitza, proper Tzuras HaPesach. Aval Kalayim, however, when it comes to Kalayim, afilu min atzad have a Tzuras Pesach. Even if it's min atzad, it's not a properly built Tzuras HaPesach. It has a din of Tzuras HaPesach. The Shabbos chamim Kalayim, but Shabbos is more stringent, has more requirements than Kalayim. Shabbos requires a mechitza, needs to be properly enclosed, and only a properly built Tzuras HaPesach, where the top post is leaning on the side posts, they're supporting each other, considered to be one single entity, which creates that doorway, creates that enclosure, creates that separating factor. It's considered like a mechitza. Then it works. But when it comes to Kilayim, you don't need that much, as long as it appears like a separate area. Even if it's a Tzuras HaPesach min atzad, which appears like an entranceway, like a doorway, that's enough. As Rashi brought earlier, the Mishnah in Kilayim, which says that if there's a fence in between the two species, that's okay, as long as it appears separate. The point is that it shouldn't appear mixed up and one planting area. Continues the Gemara. V'ramid Rabbi Yochanan. We seem to have a contradiction between our Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yochanan elsewhere. V'ramid Rish Lakish. We seem to have a stira between Rish Lakish over here, which contradicts the Rish Lakish stated elsewhere. The Amar Rish Lakish Mishum Yehuda Bar Chanina. Muteres lenikalayim. Peah is the braided vine branch. So it's the same as we discussed. We have the poles with the vine branch stretching from one pole to the other, creating a tzuras HaPesach. Rish Lakish tells us in the name of his Rebbe that this type of thing is muteres lenikalayim avaloi l'Shabbos. It can be applied for kalayim to separate the two species, but it cannot be applied for Shabbos to allow carrying within it. So this is in contrast with Rish Lakish number 1, who told us that can be applied for Shabbos as well as kalayim. That's one kash. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, mechitzas l'Shabbos deloy. Just as this is not a mechitzah for Shabbos, you can't allow carrying within the tzuras HaPesach. Kach mechitzas l'kalayim deloy. Likewise, when it comes to kalayim, these are not considered mechitzas. This is in contrast with Rabbi Yochanan number 1, who said they can be applied for kalayim. So you seem to have a two-way steer. Says in Rabbi Shloim with the Rish Lakish like kasha. Perhaps you can say that we can answer the two halachas of Rish Lakish. It's not difficult. Ha didei ha de Rabbi. The earlier Rish Lakish was his own shita didei, who said we can apply the tzuras HaPesach to kalayim and to Shabbos. Ha de Rabbi. Rish Lakish number 2 was merely quoting his Rebbe, who holds that it's not an effective tzuras HaPesach. So we addressed that contradiction. It's not a steer to begin with. Elo de Rabbi Yochanan kasha. But the two Rabbi Yochanans seem to contradict each other. Earlier he said that it works for kalayim, and now he says it doesn't. Says the Gemara, now, it's all good and well if you say as follows. If you propose that Hosam al Gaban, Rabbi Yochanan number 1 was describing a properly built tzuras HaPesach, where the vine was on top of the poles, which has a din of tzuras HaPesach. However, it was wider than 10 amos, in which case Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rav, that tzuras HaPesach is ineffective by a pirza which is greater than 10 amos. So that explains why Rabbi Yochanan told us that it cannot be effective for Shabbos, but it can work for kalayim, which doesn't require a proper mechitza, a proper tzuras HaPesach, and this is enough to create impression of separateness, to separate the two planting areas. So that explains matters, why it works for kalayim, not for Shabbos. So that addresses Rabbi Yochanan number 1. Hacha minatzad. The second Rabbi Yochanan is describing a tzuras HaPesach, which was not built properly. It was minatzad. The vine was alongside the pole, in which case it does not have a din of a tzuras HaPesach whatsoever, and cannot be applied even for kalayim. Shaper. So this will work well. This will answer the apparent steer. Eloi Amris. But if you propose that Rabbi Yochanan does not hold like Rav, he holds that even when it's wider than 10 amos, the tzuras HaPesach can close that area. If so, why did Rabbi Yochanan tell us earlier that the tzuras HaPesach is not effective for Shabbos? Apparently, it was like you told me, that because it was minatzad, it wasn't a proper tzuras HaPesach. So, if Rabbi Yochanan number 1 was describing a Pesach minatzad, and Rabbi Yochanan number 2 apparently is also describing that type of tzuras HaPesach, that's why it's ineffective. So they're both speaking about improperly built tzuras HaPesachs. So why that discrepancy between Rabbi Yochanan number 1 who tells us that it works for kalayim, in contrast to here, where he says it does work for kalayim? Eli Amris, but if you say that both halachas of Rabbi Yochanan was describing a tzuras HaPesach minatzad, not a proper tzuras HaPesach, and that's why the earlier Rabbi Yochanan tells us it doesn't work for Shabbos, but it works for kalayim. How is that compatible with the second Rabbi Yochanan who says it doesn't even work for kalayim? Michael and Mema, what can we say? Says in Olam, truthfully, minatzad. Both Rabbi Yochanans are describing a tzuras HaPesach which was minatzad, which is ineffective for Shabbos because it's not considered like a mechitza, because it's not properly built. The only thing it can work for is kalayim, which doesn't need a proper enclosure. Merely a separateness is sufficient. Both are speaking about tzuras HaPesach which was built on the side, not a proper tzuras HaPesach. So the pole on top was affixed to the side of the post. So why the discrepancy between Rabbi Yochanan number 1 who tells us that it can be applied to kalayim, in contrast to Rabbi Yochanan number 2 who says it can't? Hasam be'eser, hacha b'yaisim eser. The earlier Rabbi Yochanan was describing a tzuras HaPesach which was merely 10 amos or less. as opposed to the second Rabbi Yochanan was speaking about a large Tzuras HaPesach, which was wider than 10 amas, in which case it's not effective even for Kalayim. Meaning that even though we're speaking about Kalayim, it doesn't really need a proper halachic Tzuras HaPesach. Merely an appearance of separation is enough. That's why even a Tzuras HaPesach min hatzad works. However, there is a difference between a Tzuras HaPesach which is Eser Amos, which is still within the dimensions of a proper doorway. So you notice these sides, it looks like you're entering a new area. It gives that appearance of separation, as opposed to a very wide Tzuras HaPesach, more than 10 amas. Those side posts are positioned too far away from each other. It gives that appearance of cohesion, as though it's an entranceway, and therefore it doesn't even work for Kalayim. This is a chiddush in the Gemara, that Kalayim, if it's Yosef Me'eser, cannot use the Tzuras HaPesach. The Gemara is going to challenge this. Munot Temra. How do you know this concept? The Shanelon, that will make a difference for us, Bein Eser, Yosef Me'eser, between 10 and more than 10, when it comes to Kalayim, which really needs just separation, doesn't really need machitza. How do you know to make that distinction? So I'll prove it to you. The Amalei Rav Yochanan Shlakish. Rav Yochanan turned to Rav Shlakish and he said, Loikach Haya Maisa. Was this not the narration of the following incident? Shahar Lach Rabbi Shua, Eitzel Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri L'Lmud Torah. Rabbi Shua went to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri to learn Torah. Rabbi Shua Baki B'Echaz Kalayim. So even though Rabbi Shua was well versed in the halachas of Kalayim, nevertheless he didn't hesitate to approach Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri to ask him a shaila of Hilchas Kalayim, to seize that opportunity. Umatzai, and he found him sheyoyshe ben Eilanis. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri was sitting between the trees. Umasach zmeira be'il Shlakish stretched. He was matach zmeira, stretched a vine from one tree to the other to demonstrate a situation and ask him a shaila regarding the halach. Va'amarlai, and he turned to Rabbi Yochanan and he told him, Rebbe, Igafanim kan. Let's say there are vines planted within this Tzuras HaPesach that I've just created. Mal is re'kan. When one plant another min outside this Tzuras HaPesach. So you know what he responded? Amalei told him, Be'eser mutar, be'yosem eser aser. If the width of this Tzuras HaPesach is 10, then it's okay. Then it serves as a separating factor. But if it's wider than 10, it's no longer effective. And you cannot plant in this manner. Says Rabbi Maya Skinner, what are we speaking about? What type of Tzuras HaPesach was it? Ilim al Gabon, that the vine was situated on top of the side poles. That's a proper Tzuras HaPesach. Yosem Eser Aser? How can you say that if it's larger than 10 amas, it's Aser, doesn't create that separation by Kalayim? Vatani went in a brayso that it works for Kalayim. Ho Yisham Kanan Hadu Kuranan. There were these poles that were inserted into the ground. Va'asalahen and Peah Malamala, and he formed this Peah, this braided vine branch, so he stretched the branch from one pole to the other, creating a Tzuras HaPesach. Even if it's wider than 10 amas, it's effective for Kalayim. So why did he differentiate between 10 and more than 10? Elav ben Atzad. Apparently, the situation there was a Tzuras HaPesach which was built min hatzad, not a properly configured Tzuras HaPesach. And he told him, it depends how wide it is. Be'eser mutar, if it's merely 10 amas wide, then it's okay, because it creates that separation for Kalayim. Yosem eser asa, but if it's wider than 10, it's also shma mina. We can certainly conclude from this that even when it comes to Kalayim, which doesn't require a proper Tzuras HaPesach, even min hatzad is enough due to the fact that it creates that impression of separateness, but that only works if the width of that entry point is 10 or less. But if it's too wide, it doesn't even create an impression of a doorway and of a separation. So in conclusion, regarding a Tzuras HaPesach min hatzad, Rav Chizda says it's ineffective. Rabbi Yochanan maintains that this halacha of Rav Chizda applies strictly to Shabbos, which certainly requires a properly constructed Tzuras HaPesach to create a proper din mechitza, to properly contain the area beside it. However, when it comes to Kalayim, over there you only need an appearance of separation to separate the two planting areas. Therefore, says Rabbi Yochanan, if this Tzuras HaPesach min hatzad is 10 amos or less in width, it won't apply to Shabbos, but can be effective for Kalayim to create that separateness between both planting areas. However, if it's wider than 10 amos, that won't even work for Kalayim because it doesn't even give the appearance of a doorway. Whereas Rish Lakish holds that if the Tzuras HaPesach min hatzad is 10 amos or less in width, that can apply even to Shabbos. But if it's wider than 10 amos, in which case there are two negative factors. Number one, it's improperly built because it's min atzad. Number two, it's too wide of a opening. That cannot be applied to Shabbos. However, when it comes to kilayim, even this can be effective because nevertheless, it still gives somewhat of an appearance of a separating factor, and therefore it creates that hefsek between both planting areas, and is matter to plant one min on this side and another min on the other side. Continues the Gemara. Gufa, we just learned Amar of Chizda, Tzuras HaPesach she'asa min atzad, lo yasa leklum. So if you constructed the Tzuras HaPesach sideways, with the upper pole, instead of resting on the side post, it was affixed to the side of it, lo yasa leklum, he hadn't done anything, meaning it's ineffective. V'amar of Chizda, Tzuras HaPesach she'amru. The Tzuras HaPesach, which was taught as being a halachic Tzuras HaPesach, it needs to be strong enough to accommodate, to be able to support a door. So although an actual door is not needed, but it needs to be strong enough to theoretically accommodate a door. Tzricha shtei brio needs to be strong enough k'dei lahamed b'deles, to be able to affix a door to it. I feel a deles shall kash, even a lightweight door made of straw. Omer shlokesh b'shmur of Yanei, Tzuras HaPesach, tzricha heker tzir. It needs to have a heker of a tzir. A tzir is a hinge of a door. So it needs to appear like it can accommodate the door and the hinge of the door. What does this mean? My heker tzir, amar avia avaksa, means that it has to feature that hole in the ground by that doorway where they would insert the rod, this hinge which was protruding from the door, which would spin in this hole. So Tzuras HaPesach needs to have this hole in the ground in order to give the appearance of a proper doorway, that it could accommodate a door. Continues the Gemara, Ashkechinu Rav Acha Breda Rav Avia. Rav Acha Breda Rav Avia found, he encountered L'Talmidei the Rav Ashi, the Talmidei Rav Ashi, Amar Luhu, so he asked him, Amar Mar B'Tzuras HaPesach, Amar Mar Midi B'Tzuras HaPesach, did your Rebbe Rav Ashi say anything, teach you any halacha regarding Tzuras HaPesach? Amar Leis, they told him, no, he hadn't told us anything. So he offered them the following halacha. Tana, we learned in the Brisa, Tzuras HaPesach she'amru. What is the proper Tzuras HaPesach? Kana mikan, a pole on one side of the doorway, v'kana mikan, a kana on the other side, v'kana al gabeim, and a kana, a pole on top of them. So that's the proper configuration of a Tzuras HaPesach. Continues the Gemara. Well, we have a question. Does the top pole need to actually touch the bottom poles, the side poles? Tzrich and liga, do they need to touch each other? Or perhaps there's no need for them to touch each other. Rav Nachman Amar, they don't need to touch each other. So even if the top pole is suspended above the side post, not actually touching them, that's okay. So although they look like they're acting independently, nevertheless, they join together to form a doorway, and they're considered Tzuras HaPesach. Rav Sheshes Amar, they need to touch each other. They need to appear like they're supporting each other, joining together as one entity to create that din of Tzuras HaPesach, that doorway, which is considered a mechitza. Continues the Gemara. Azar Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman proceeded. So he was the one who held that you don't need to actually touch. Va'avad uvda, he actually followed through with halacha l'maisa. Beirish galusa, he instructed the people of the Reish Galusa, of the head of the Golas, Kishmaite, in accordance with his Shita. So he instructed them to enclose an area. He allowed them to do it, even though the top pole was not actually touching and resting on the bottom poles. Amalei Rav Sheshes Hashamit. So Rav Sheshes, who was the one who disagreed, who held that the top pole needs to actually touch and rest on the bottom poles, so he disapproved of this Tzuras HaPesach. So he instructed his servant, Amalei Rav Sheshes L'Shamei, whose name was Rav Gada, Zil, go ahead, Shloif Shadinu, pull out the poles and throw them away. Azal, so he went, Shalav Shadinu, he pulled them out and threw them away. Ashkechud V'Reish Galusa. So the fellows of Reish Galusa found him, they caught him, Chavshu, they locked him up. Azal Rav Sheshes. So Rav Sheshes went, Come above. He stood by the doorway and he announced, Amalei Gada, that was his name, Gada. Puk ta, go out and come. So now the people realized that it was actually Sheshes who sent him, who was accountable for it. So they decided to release him. Nafak He went out, v'asa, and he came. Continues the Gemara. Ashkechei Rav Sheshes, l'Rav Bar Shmuel. So Rav Sheshes encountered Rav Bar Shmuel, Amalei, and he asked him, Tani mar midi b'tzuras HaPesach, did you learn any halacha regarding tzuras HaPesach? Amalei, yes. He said yes. Tani, we learned in a brayso. Kippah. If there is a doy which is shaped like a dome, so it's wide on bottom, and it narrows as it gets to the top. Rameir Machayiv Mezuzah. Rameir says it needs to have a mezuzah. It's considered to be a Pesach, a doy. V'chacham Paitrim, they don't require mezuzah. The brayso continues. V'shavan, they all agree. Shem yesh b'raglei asara, that if on the bottom portion, raglei means its legs, meaning where it meets the ground, and over there it's 4 tfachim wide, so the minimum size of a doy of a Shiur Pesach is 4 tfachim wide and 10 tfachim in height. Now this doorway here, this kippah, was 4 tfachim wide on bottom, but then it narrowed, and as it ascended, it narrowed, and you only had an area of less than 4 tfachim. So the brayso says that if on the bottom, the bottom portion of the door near the ground, which is 4 tfachim wide, there is actually a gap of 10 tfachim in height, so you have an empty space of 10 height by 4 width. All agree this is a proper doy. All agree shechayeves, because it's a proper Shiur Pesach. So what then is the machlekes? Amar Abaye, he explained as follows. Hakol moedim, all agree in the following two cases that there will be no din Pesach, there will be no chiv mezuzah. Hakol moedim, all agree im gavoya asara, if the entire doorway is 10 tfachim high. So the wide portion and the narrow portion are a total of 10 tfachim in height. However, v'ein b'raglei shleisha, the bottom portion, which is 4 tfachim wide, is not stretched for 3 tfachim in height from the ground. So it's less than 3 tfachim in height. That's worthless. That's considered to be loved. It's as though it's the ground. And therefore, all agree there's no Shiur Pesach. There's no entranceway. So this is agreed upon by all. There's no chiv mezuzah. Inami, or in the following case, where yesh b'raglei shleisha, that the bottom portion of that doorway, which is 4 tfachim wide, contains a height of 3 tfachim, at least 3 tfachim. However, if the entire doorway is less than 10 tfachim high, so in both these cases, v'loy klum, all agree, it's not considered a Pesach, there's no chiv mezuzah, because there's no shear. Kipli, when are they having a machlekes? In the following case, yesh b'raglei shleisha, the bottom portion of that doorway, which is 4 tfachim wide, extends upward for at least 3 tfachim. Ugvoy asara, and the entire doorway is 10 tfachim in height. What's the problem? The top of the doorway narrows. Ve'enu chavar ba. On top, you don't have a space 4 tfachim wide. However, v'yesh b'lachak lashlim la'arba, you have some warm material there, which can theoretically be removed to make space for a properly configured doorway. This is the point of the machlekes. Rameir Sava Chakikin Lashlim. We visualize as though that warm material is removed in order to complete the doorway. So since you have an initiation of a doorway on bottom, because on bottom you have an area which is 4 tfachim wide, you have a substantial initiation of a doorway, we ignore the warm material which is protruding on top of the doorway into the doorway. We view it as though it's been removed because theoretically it can accommodate a doorway which has already been initiated on bottom. So that's choykik in lahashlam. We remove the warm material, we scrape it out to complete the proper shear of a doorway. For a bonus sabri, ain choykik in lahashlam, we don't do that. Bottom line, there's warm material there which is blocking the entranceway. In any case, what do we see from here? Rav Meir says this is considered to be a proper Pesach, despite the fact that the top post of this Pesach, where is it? It's embedded in the wall. It's not actually resting on the side posts. It's not touching them. It's being separated by warm material. Apparently, the top post of a Tzuras HaPesach does need to actually touch the side posts. So this was Rabbi Bar Shmuel speaking, telling this to Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes holds there needs to be a negia. The top post needs to touch the side posts. So he responded to him. Amalei Rav Sheshes responded, you know what? If you happen to find some members of the Reish Galusa's home, we had the incident earlier where Rav Sheshes sent his servant to uproot their Tzuras HaPesach because the top post was not resting on the side posts, which is in contrast with the brisa here, which seems to tell us there's no need for that to happen. So if Sheshes asked him a favor, if you happen to meet those members, don't tell them anything from this brisa of kippah, which seems to indicate that I was wrong. I don't want them to come harass me. If I decide to change my mind, let me do it on my own, without any external pressures. Continues the Mishnah, Hechsher Mavi. So the Mavi, this alleyway which is leading into Shirabim, Mendarabbanan, one may not carry within the alleyway, because if you allow carrying there, perhaps he'll continue carrying Shirabim as well. He won't realize that it's a separate entity. So one must separate the two areas by placing something at the entranceway. Hechsher Mavi. How is one meant to adapt the Mavi for carrying? Beishami Oimim Leche V'Koira. He needs to have both a leche, a side post, and a beam going across the entranceway to properly cordon off this mavi. One or the other. Oy lechi, oy koir. Two leches are required, one on either side of the entranceway. Mishum Rabbi Shmuel, in the name of Rabbi Shmuel, Omar Talmud Echad, a certain Talmud said, Lifnei Rabbi Kiva, in front of Rabbi Kiva as follows. Lo nechlaku b'sham b'silo. B'sham b'silo are not having any machlokes between themselves. If it's a small entranceway, al mavi shu pachas ma'arba amis. If the entire entranceway is less than 4 amis in width. In this case, all agree shu nitar oy belechi oy b'kira. It is permitted either with a lechi or kira. Al ma nechlaku. When are they having a machlokes? When it's a wide entranceway. Al rachav me'arba amis v'adeser. Anyway, from 4 amis up until 10. In this case, this is machlokes. Shemeshami oimim lechi v'kira. To place a lechi and a kira to properly shut off that entranceway. Either one is enough. Rabbi Kiva, actually not. In both cases, they have a machlokes. Now the Gemara is assuming we're speaking about a mavi mefulish, an open-ended mavi, open on both sides of Shirabim, and the Mishnah tells us a lechi and kaira are sufficient, which is in contrast to what we learned earlier in Daf Vav. We had a brisa speaking about a mavi mefulish, where Hanani tells us a door is required. Tanakama says a Pesach is required, which is incompatible to our Mishnah. Come on, who is our Mishnah following? The Loika Hananya, who requires door. The Loika Tanakama, who requires a Pesach. Amar Yehuda, Hachikama. This is what the Mishnah is speaking about. Hechsha Mavi Sasam Ketzad. How does one adapt an enclosed Mavi? We're not speaking about a Mavi foolish. Beishami Oimim Lechi V'Koira. Ubisiloimim one or the other. Oy Lechi V'Koira. Analyzes the Gemara. To properly close off that entranceway. Apparently, the Kasari Bishami hold Abba Mechitza D'Oraisa. In order for it to be considered a proper Shechad, Minator needs to be closed off on 4 sides. Therefore, he needs to properly close off that 4th side, that entranceway, with a Leche V'Kira, which is considered a proper Mechitza, to give a full enclosure. Is that the case? We need 4 mechitzas on 4 sides to be considered sayachid? No! Actually, 3 is enough. If there are merely 3 mechitzas, that's enough to be considered sayachid. So if one is standing in Shirabim and throws something into there, he's chayiv. Midrabanan, we need 4 lataltel to allow carrying within it. Meaning midrabanan adika arba, you can only do that if you are enclosed on all 4 sides. Therefore, you need a lecha v'kura at the entranceway. One or the other is sufficient. Because evidently they hold that the entryway to the mavi doesn't need to be fully blocked off with a mechitza, because the mavi is already a self-contained entity surrounded by 3 sides with mechitzas, which make it a shayachit. If so, says the Gemara, lema shall we say, Kosavi Beisil holds shalosh mechitzas d'oraisa, that only a place which is contained by 3 mechitzas is considered min Torah like a rosh hashayachit, but merely 2 mechitzas are insufficient. Says the Gemara, no, not necessarily. Perhaps even 2 can make a Rosh Hashanah. Lizroik is time with the Machayev. If a place has 2 mechitzas surrounding it, that's a Rosh Hashanah. So if one throws into that area from the Rosh Hashanah, he is Chayev. It's only midrabanan that we require more. Litaltel, to allow carrying within that area. Adi kashalish, that's only allowed if it's fully enclosed. If it has 3 mechitzas surrounding it, so the 4 sides like the entryway. But otherwise it needs to be fully enclosed by 3 mechitzas to allow carrying within that area, midrabanan. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. We began discussing a Tzuras HaPesach, which according to the Tana of our Mishnah is considered like a machitza. Therefore, it can be applied even to a entryway which is wider than 10 amis. According to Rav, it cannot. It can be applied to a koira which is above 20 amas from the Mavi? What about if the upper post of the Tzuras HaPesach, instead of being above the side posts, was affixed to the side? It's min hatzad. According to Rav Chizda, is ineffective. Rabbi Yechon explains that only is regarding Shabbos. When it comes to Kilayim, it depends. If the doorway is 10 amos or less, then it will work. Rish Lakish says, in that case, it works even for Shabbos. When it's wider than 10 amos, it works for Kilayim and not for Shabbos. Rav Shesha says the top post needs to actually lean on the side posts. Rav Nachum says it doesn't. What is the adaptation of a Mavi? The Shammai say lechi v'koir. They still say one or the other. Rav Lezer says a lechi on either side of the entryway.